All right, so today we're starting 8.5, which is titled The Law of Sines and the Law of Cosines. And today we are going to focus on the law of sines. Okay, so the first thing we have to remember how to do is use our calculator to find the trig ratios, and then you're rounding to the nearest hundredth. So when you're doing this, remember, make sure that you are in degree mode if you're plugging in a degree. So when you do the tangent of 103, you should have got negative 4.33. Okay, and notice it says round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so make sure that we're following those directions. And then for the cosine of 165, you get negative 0.965. Okay, I only need to worry about what is directly behind it. So this is going to round it up to 0.97. Okay, so today we're going to learn about the law of sines. So if you already looked at this, you can see your law of sines is going to be an equation that you can use as a proportion. So we have the sine of A over A equals the sine of B over B equals the sine of C over C. Now, when we use this, we usually just use two at a time. Because if I just use two at a time, what could I use to solve? Yeah, I could just do cross multiplying, right? Okay, or you could have sine of A equal to sine C over C. You could have the B and the C. Now, let's take a look and see what these actually mean. So for your A, the sine of capital A is over little a. So let's look at their relationship. Here's A, here's little a. Okay, what is their relationship? Yeah, they're opposite or they're across the triangle from each other. Okay, now notice that this triangle does not look like the other triangles that we have been working with when we were doing sine, cosine, and tangent, because those triangles were what? Right triangles. Okay, yeah, so this one does not have a right angle, and that's why the law of sines is useful. Okay, so if you need to find a side or an angle, but it's not a right angle. Okay, notice that the same thing happens for B. Okay, big B and little b are across from each other, and big C and little c are across from each other. Okay, so that's how you can pick out what I call the pair, the matching pair. Okay, so the pairs are going to be opposite from each other. So for example 2, we're going to find each measure. Round lengths to the nearest tenth, it says. And then you're going to round angles to the nearest degree. Okay, so if it's a side length, we're going to round to the tenth. And then if it's an angle measure, we're going to round to the nearest degree. Now, this one is nice because I already have 39 degrees and I already have 32 degrees. Okay, and if I had to find out what angle G was, I could do that right away because I know that 39 plus 32, I could subtract that from what? I could subtract that from 180 and then find out what that angle is. Okay, so if I do 180 minus 39 minus 32, I get 109. Now, what I want to do is find a matching pair. And what I mean by that is an angle that is across from a side. So I only have one side, and that's 40. Okay? What do you think is across from 40? What angle? F. Okay, so you have 40, which is across from F. So 40 is little f. Okay, side FG is across from what angle? H. Okay, so that's what we're trying to find, is we're trying to find little h. Okay, so I know that FG is equal to little h. So what I want to do is set up my law of sines. Okay, I think of this as we have one pair. which is angle F and side F. Okay, so then I can set up my law of sines. Okay, so if I have the sine of F over the side F, that's going to equal the sine of H over little h. Okay, so the sine of F is going to be the sine of 39 degrees over 40. And that's going to equal the sine of 32 degrees over h. So we have a proportion so we're going to cross multiply to solve. Okay, so you're always going to want to have an angle and a side so that you can figure out what that is. So when you do cross multiplying, you can do h times the sine of 39 degrees, and that would equal 40 times the sine of 32 degrees, and then you're just going to divide both sides by the sine of 39. Okay, so h is going to be 40 times the sine of 32 divided by the sine of 39. Okay, and I'm going to show you how you can do that in your calculator. Okay, so then we'd have 40 times the sine of 32, and then I do have to close that parenthesis, and then divide it by the sine of 39. Okay, now this is a side length, so it said to round to the nearest tenth. So 33 point, see how it's 6/8? So that's going to bump it up to 7. Okay, and then so that's my side H. Okay, and that's all I have to find for that one, right? Just FG, so just side H. All right, let's flip it over. Okay, now for this one, I have to find the measure of angle Q. Okay, so I'm trying to find the measure of angle Q. And I'm given the angle is 51 degrees. Oh yeah, and then you have your 6 and 8. So sometimes what I like to do is just label what these are going to be. So if this is Q, this is my lowercase q. If this is R, this is lowercase r. And if this is P, this is lowercase p. It won't be P prime. That's a image and a pre-image.
No, since it's like kind of hard to tell if it's such like big P, little P.
Oh. No. Which one is going to be your pair? What's going to be your matching pair? The 51 degrees and the 8, right? Which goes with P. Okay? So see how this is the only one that has an angle measure and a side length? The only ones that are across from each other? Okay, so then what we're going to set up is the sine of P over lowercase p equals the sine of q over lowercase q. Okay, so for P I have 51 degrees and 8. We don't know the sine of q, we're going to find that, and then 6. So in this case, we're finding an angle measure. Okay, we're trying to find an angle measure. So what we want to do is get the sine of q by itself. Okay, we can't just get q by itself, we have to get the sine of q by itself. So we are going to cross multiply. So I have 6 times the sine of 51 degrees equals 8 times the sine of q. And then I'll divide both sides by 8. Okay, so then I'll have the sine of q equals 6 sine of 51 degrees divided by 8. Now what you don't want to do here is divide by sine. Okay, you can't separate that. When you want to find an angle, what do you have to use? Yes, you have to use the inverse. Okay, so then what we can do to find the measure of angle Q, that's going to equal the sine inverse of 6 times the sine of 51 degrees divided by 8. Okay, so we have to take this and we have to do the sine inverse. Okay, and you can plug that in all at once. I can show you how. So you would do the sine inverse of 65, or sorry, this is just 6. 6 times the sine of 51 divided by 8. Right? And since this is an angle measure, we are rounding to the nearest whole number. Yep, so this is going to be 36 degrees. Okay, so the measure of angle Q is going to be approximately 36 degrees. Now, if you wanted to, you could do 6 times the sine of 51 degrees first, then divide that by 8. And then if you have a graphing calculator, you would do the second sine inverse and then your second answer. And you get the same thing. But you can just plug it all in at one time as well. Okay, so just a couple things we have to remember. Okay, we are going to use the inverse of sine. Sine -1, we'll call it of x. Okay, because you can't just have nothing there, it has to be of something. To find, what do we use the inverse to find? Angles. Okay, and then you are going to use the sine function, which is just the sine of theta, to find what? What do we use the regular sign for? Yeah, good. Okay, so for your homework, which I'm going to let you start on here, there's going to be a worksheet portion and a book portion, but it's only part of the worksheet. Okay, so you're going to want to write this down. So you're going to do 10 through 12 and 26 through 38 from the text. I'm not sure what page that is. It's 8.5. Okay, now on this worksheet that I'm going to give you, there's 2 sides. One says practice A, one says practice B. Okay, so for practice B, you're doing 10 through 15. Okay, so maybe when you first get that, you want to circle that those are the ones that you're going to do. Did you guys find the page yet?